In the frozen marshlands of Vaslui, 40,000 corpses lay scattered like broken dolls across blood-soaked earth. The year was 1475, and the man responsible for this unprecedented slaughter wasn't the infamous Vlad the Impaler. It was his cousin, a ruler so strategically brutal that he made Vlad's theatrical cruelties look like child's play. Yet somehow, history forgot his name. This forgotten prince didn't just defeat the mighty Ottoman Empire, he systematically erased entire armies from existence. While Vlad impaled thousands in dramatic displays, this man perfected the art of making his enemies vanish without a trace. His name was Stephen the Great of Moldavia, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why he was the most terrifying ruler medieval Europe ever produced. So how does a 17-year-old refugee become a brutal monster, and why did the world choose to forget him? Our story begins on a bloody night in 1451. 17-year-old Stephen jolts awake to the sound of screaming. Armed men have stormed his father's palace in Moldavia. Bogdan II, Stephen's father and the rightful prince, is dragged from his bed and butchered like an animal by the usurper Petru Aron's assassins. But they don't just kill Bogdan, they mutilate his body, displaying it as a warning to anyone who might challenge Aron's stolen throne. Young Stephen, hidden by loyal servants, watches through a crack in the wall as his father's corpse is destroyed, piece by piece. In that moment, something fundamental breaks inside the boy, and something far more dangerous is born. Stephen flees into the frozen night with nothing but blood-stained clothes and a burning hatred that will consume the next 50 years of his life. He's not just running from death, he's running toward a destiny that will make him the most feared Christian warrior the Islamic world has ever faced. Stephen finds sanctuary with his cousin Vlad in Wallachia, and here's where their parallel journeys begin. Both are sons of murdered fathers. Both are teenage refugees with nothing left to lose. Both will become legends of brutality, but their methods will be as different as fire and ice. While living in exile, Stephen watches Vlad develop his taste for theatrical cruelty. Vlad enjoys the spectacle of suffering. He wants his enemies to see their fate coming, to scream, to beg. But Stephen is learning something far more chilling, that the most effective cruelty is the kind nobody sees coming. Ironically, both cousins find themselves under the protection of John Hunyadi, the same Hungarian warlord who orchestrated the downfall of Vlad's father. This bitter irony teaches Stephen a crucial lesson. In the game of medieval politics, today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally, and survival depends on thinking 10 moves ahead. During those years of exile, Stephen makes a silent vow over his father's memory. He won't just reclaim his throne, he'll make sure that anyone who dares to challenge him will simply cease to exist, not through dramatic displays like Vlad, but through something far more terrifying: complete and total erasure. April 1457. Vlad has reclaimed his throne in Wallachia and decides to eliminate his political enemies in typical fashion. He invites hundreds of boyars to an Easter feast, then springs his trap. The older nobles are dragged outside and impaled on stakes in a gruesome public display. The younger ones are marched to his ruined castle and forced to rebuild it stone by stone until their clothes fall off their bodies. But Vlad's Easter massacre serves a dual purpose. It frees up 6,000 of his best cavalry to help Stephen reclaim Moldavia. This isn't just family loyalty, it's strategic genius. By installing Stephen as his ally to the north, Vlad secures his border and gains a partner for his brewing war with the Ottomans. Stephen crosses into Moldavia with Vlad's cavalry, but his campaign reveals the fundamental difference between the cousins. While Vlad's Easter massacre was a spectacular display of vengeance, Stephen's reconquest is a masterclass in surgical warfare. At Dolgest on April 12th, remember the murderer of Stephen's father? It is his time now. Stephen doesn't just defeat Petru Aron's army, he orchestrates their complete annihilation. But here's the interesting part. There are no dramatic displays, no impaled corpses, no theatrical cruelty. Aaron's soldiers simply disappear. Those who survive the initial battle are systematically hunted down and eliminated. Stephen doesn't give his enemies time to regroup. Within days, he tracks down Aaron's remaining forces at Orbic and inflicts an even more devastating defeat. Aaron flees to Poland, then Hungary, never to return. His supporters vanish without a trace. Stephen proceeds to Suceava, where he's acclaimed as prince by the boyars and clergy. But those who witnessed his campaign know the truth. They've just crowned a ruler whose capacity for calculated brutality exceeds anything they've ever seen. Yet Stephen wears the mask of piety perfectly, presenting himself as God's chosen instrument. Over the next 17 years, Stephen systematically eliminates every threat to his rule. But unlike Vlad's visible forests of impaled victims, Stephen's enemies simply vanish. Rival claimants to the throne disappear in the night. Rebellious boyars are found dead in their beds. Entire families of potential threats cease to exist. By 1474, Stephen's growing power has attracted the attention of Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople. Mehmed sends Stephen an ultimatum: surrender the strategic ports of Chilea and Achaemen, come to Constantinople to pay homage, or face the full might of the Ottoman Empire. Stephen's response is typically calculated. Instead of sending a dramatic refusal like Vlad might, he simply ignores the ultimatum. But behind the scenes, he's already preparing for what he knows is coming: the largest Ottoman invasion force ever assembled against a Christian kingdom. Stephen has spent years building an intelligence network that rivals anything in medieval Europe. He knows exactly when the Ottomans will invade, which route they'll take, and how many men they're bringing. While you might see this has luck, but indeed it is the result of 17 years of methodical preparation. As the Ottomans continue to gather their forces in Sofia, Stephen is already preparing his masterpiece, a trap so perfectly designed that it will become a textbook example of strategic warfare for centuries to come. December 1474. The Ottoman invasion force that crosses into Moldavia is a sight that would terrify any medieval ruler. Between 60,000 and 120,000 men, Janissaries, Sipahi cavalry, Akinci raiders, and 20,000 Bulgarian peasants forced to clear roads and build bridges. Leading this massive army is Hadan Suleiman Pasha, one of the empire's most experienced generals. But as this terrifying war machine advances into Moldavia, something strange begins to happen. The countryside appears empty, villages stand abandoned, wells have been poisoned, and the very landscape seems to be working against the invaders. This is where Stephen turned his entire kingdom into a weapon. Stephen's scorched earth policy goes far beyond military necessity. Every burned village, every poisoned well, every evacuated town is precisely calculated to guide the Ottoman army toward exactly where he wants them. With the tactic of denying them supplies, he's psychologically breaking them before the battle even begins. Picture this massive army, the pride of the Ottoman Empire, marching through an increasingly hostile wasteland. They're cold, hungry, and demoralized. Their scouts report empty villages ahead, but no sign of Stephen's army. The psychological pressure is immense. Where is the enemy? When will they strike? The Ottoman scouts now report something that seems like salvation: untouched villages near Vaslui. Finally, a place where they can rest, resupply, and prepare for the final push to Moldavia's capital. Suleiman Pasha orders his exhausted army toward what he thinks is their salvation. He has no idea he's walking into the most perfectly designed killing ground in medieval warfare. Dawn breaks cold and misty on January 10th, 1475. The dense fog is so thick that visibility is reduced to mere yards. The Ottoman army, exhausted from weeks of marching through Stephen's wasteland, approaches what they think is just another river crossing. What they fail to see is they are walking towards the face of death. Stephen has positioned his forces with surgical precision. Peasants and archers hide in the forests on 3 sides of the valley. Artillery is aimed directly at the bridge. His elite cavalry waits in reserve, ready to strike when the trap is complete. As the Ottoman cavalry begins crossing the wooden bridge, the structure collapses under their weight, exactly as Stephen planned. Thousands of soldiers are trapped in the marshy valley below, unable to retreat or advance effectively. At this moment, Stephen's artillery opens fire from 3 directions, while archers, unable to see through the fog, follow the sound of screaming men. The Moldavian light cavalry makes hit-and-run attacks, luring more Ottomans into the killing ground. When Stephen finally orders his main assault, the Ottoman army simply disintegrates. Suleiman Pasha loses complete control of his forces and signals a retreat, but it's too late. The fleeing survivors are pursued by Moldavian and Polish cavalry for 3 days, hunted like animals through the frozen countryside. The final count is staggering. At least 40,000 Ottoman dead, nearly 2/3 of their entire army. 4 pashas killed, 100 battle standards captured. According to chronicler Jan Długosz, all but the most eminent of the Turkish prisoners are impaled, their corpses burned in massive pyres visible for miles. After achieving what Venetian chroniclers called the greatest victory ever secured by the cross against Islam, how does Stephen celebrate? With feasts, parades, dramatic displays of his triumph? Stephen does something that reveals the true sophistication of his psychological warfare. He fasts for 40 days on bread and water and forbids anyone to attribute the victory to him, insisting that credit be given only to God. By positioning himself as God's instrument rather than just another mortal ruler, Stephen elevates his brutality from personal vengeance to divine mission. His enemies aren't just fighting a man, they're fighting heaven itself. It's psychological warfare at its most sophisticated level. Pope Sixtus IV is so impressed that he awards Stephen the title Athleta Christi, Champion of Christ. Polish chronicler Jan Długosz declares Stephen the worthiest to lead a coalition of Christian Europe against the Turks. But Stephen's true genius lies in understanding that the most terrifying reputation is built not on what people see, but on what they imagine. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, cannot let Vaslui go unanswered. In 1746, he personally leads an invasion force of 150,000 men into Moldavia, determined to crush this upstart Christian prince who dared to humiliate the Ottoman Empire. But Stephen has learned from Vaslui. He doesn't try to repeat the same tactics. Instead, he adapts. When Mehmed's massive army enters Moldavia, they find an even more complex version of Stephen's scorched earth strategy. Mehmed brings 30,000 Tatar cavalry under Menli Gire, expecting their mobility to counter Stephen's defensive tactics. But Stephen has prepared for this too. When the Tatars attack from the north, Stephen's forces rout them so completely that the survivors, as though crazed, jump into the river Dnieper. Even with 150,000 men, Mehmed cannot break Stephen's defenses. After losing 30,000 soldiers and failing to capture a single major fortress, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the most powerful ruler in the Islamic world, is forced to retreat from tiny Moldavia. What you see is a psychological earthquake that reverberates throughout Europe and the Islamic world. If Stephen can defeat Mehmed himself, what enemy could possibly challenge him? Stephen rules Moldavia for 47 years, longer than almost any medieval ruler in the region. During this time, he faces invasion after invasion, rebellion after rebellion, and each time, his response is the same: complete and total elimination of his enemies. The ultimate irony. Stephen's greatest victory wasn't military, it was psychological. He convinced history itself to forget his true nature. While Vlad became the monster of legend, Stephen became the hero of history, his churches standing as monuments to his piety rather than his brutality. The next time you hear about a forgotten hero of history, remember Stephen the Great of Moldavia. Remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are those who have learned to hide in plain sight. whose brutality is so perfectly calculated that even history itself becomes their accomplice. In the end, Stephen achieved something that even Vlad the Impaler never could. He became a monster so perfect that the world chose to remember him as a saint. And perhaps that's the most terrifying legacy of all.